Hey there. This is just going to be a quick explanation for some shoulder work we can do and some quad and our thigh work we can do. So hopefully this is helpful. If you have two myofascial balls, we're going to use two myofascial balls. Tennis balls work as well. We're going to need a couple blocks. And then if you have a sort of yoga blanket or a larger rectangular blanket, great. If you don't, beach towels or bath towels work perfect. So I'll just show you how to fold it right now. If it's a larger blanket that's a rectangle, you fold it in half. If it's a large beach towel or bath towel, you just fold that in half and you'll already have a rectangle. So if you have a big blanket, you're going to fold it one more time, find this larger rectangle, turn it sideways and roll it from here. So if you have two, great, grab two. If you only have one, we can do one. I'll just show you that you can kind of bang out a twofer and get two exercises for the price of one, I suppose. But we're going to start on the wall. You don't have to use a block, but you certainly can. And we're going to do some shoulder movement here. So I like to put the block at my third eye center and then come close to the wall. I'm going to take a ball in each hand. I'm just going to kind of have a nice bent elbow. I'm just going to be sliding the pinky edge up and down, up and down. And then I want to do that a few times. And as long as that's not painful, I'm going to attempt to not move my spine and my hips forward too much as I attempt to take the arms off the wall and then continue that exercise. These balls in your hands can be helpful because you can squeeze them and get that activity in the shoulder itself. So we're looking to be active through that entire sort of torso, shoulder blade, the front, the side, the depth, deep part of it. So you can do that a whole bunch of times. Let's call it 5 to 10 times, both just keeping the hands on the wall, sliding them up and down, or attempting to not move the spine forward as you take the arms off. Do the same thing. Then ditch that. We'll take some big shoulder rolls, or you can take some big back strokes with your arms. And then we'll just play around with a little bit of a pec stretch. So you'll stand arm distance to the wall. Thumb is going to point up. Hand is shoulder height or lower if need be. And then you can simply stay here. You could play around with opposite ear to opposite shoulder. You could play around with shifting your hips and or your feet entirely towards away from the wall. So as little or as much as it feels good on this pec. So we're just trying to get some opening here. Let's call it 10, 20 breaths here. And then I like to come out of this stretch by completely coming out of the sensation. So I wouldn't just sort of drop my arm. I would shift all the way towards the wall. And then before you go to the other side, why don't we take both hands on the wall? You can scoot your butt back. You can play around with reaching more through one side. I do want us to get some opening through the lat and side body. So some nice deliberate breaths here. So play around with shapes here. If it takes your breath away, maybe it's a place we need to stick around and try to breathe deeply and deliberately a little bit longer. You could also just have like this kind of posture. You can also play around with some cat-cows here, nice bend in the knee, moving as little or as much as we can through those hips forward and backward, and the spine forward and backward. As much as you'd like in the neck, as always, as it just feels good to your neck. So just be mindful of that. We're really looking for movement from the ribs, lower back, and hips. And you'll sort of take that pec stretch on the other side as long as you'd like. And then we're going to try to take some big shoulder movements. This is where we're trying to get upper arm bone and the shoulder blades moving through all ranges of motion. So what I'm looking for is arms are going to kind of have palms back, bend the elbows. They're pointing down, in, towards one another. Maybe you touch, maybe you reach. And then you're going to come back out and the palms rotate forward, up. Take them up to the sky as high as you can. At some point bend. So maybe you're just pointing towards, maybe you're touching, maybe you're grabbing, maybe you're reaching. And then we're just going to do the same thing. So palms head back, you bend again, internally rotate. Take them back out, palms forward, palms up, reach up, bend again. Find that, again, side body and lat opening. So do this maybe 15 times. If that feels way too overwhelming, then just take it for a handful of rounds. Nice and deliberate, maybe inhaling on the way up, exhaling on the way down, or just this continuous breath. Then we're going to play around with a different version of cat-cow on the wall. We're going to do this with our forearms on the wall. We'll call this the lateral side. So the pinky edge of your hand, your palm, and your forearm are on the wall. You're going to stand as close as you want. And we're doing cat-cows again. So a nice buoyancy, bend, softness in the knees. You're going to be inhaling whatever sort of extension of the spine and the hips that feels good. But then with the exhale, I'm kind of karate chopping a little bit, and I'm engaging that front body to pull myself into cat. So I'm inhaling and softening, and then I'm exhaling and karate chopping into the wall a little bit. If that feels good, great. If it doesn't, come back to the hands and try it. You can also do this from the floor. So this is non-weight bearing. This would be more weight bearing. So when you are ready to come to the floor, at some point here, we'll be shifting most of the activity to the floor. So it's going to be regular old cat-cow, nice and consistent throughout the breath, moving with it, inhaling into that extension, flexing with the exhales, and then try coming down to the hands, again, that lateral side. So this is where it's a lot more weight bearing. So I'm inhaling, I'm just kind of dropping into my extension, and my exhale, I'm engaging the front body, I'm engaging these lats and the shoulder, and I'm trying to pull myself into cat. And then I inhale, I just soften and naturally come into whatever extension I do. And then there's engagement on this exhale. Great, so that's just some warming up of that shoulder. And then what I would like us to play around with is getting into these lats again. So what we didn't do the other day, but hoping we can sort of get a little bit more specifically, there's two ways to do that. So we can either place the block on the second height. There's 3 heights, lowest, second height, third height. The second height below the hollow of the armpit. My arm's going to be up and over it. I'm going to try to have my elbow pointing more in the direction of my crown versus forward, if that makes sense. So I am trying to lengthen that side body, but I am fully supporting my head. My lower body is whatever angle I need it to be here. And I'm sort of just dropping into the weight of this block, this edge of the block. So this is going to be my lat, the back of the shoulder, and this front that I can grab is my pec. So I'm trying to get some compression on this lat. Nice and heavy here. Top hand can be a great kickstand. I'm just going to rock a teeny bit forward and backward. The more backward you're rocking, the more you're going to be on that lat. So you can just play around with this. If you find a spot that takes your breath away, take 3 deep breaths there. And if it doesn't sort of subside, then maybe move a little bit or move the block or move yourself on the block a little bit. Some few deep breaths here. So I do want to get some compression here in this lat. Then we're going to switch it up. You're going to use that top hand. Do this for 1 to 2 minutes. We're going to push ourselves up. We are going to take this so this is more in the hollow of the armpit, and we're going to come back to that same concept, but now you can play around with going a little bit more forward on that pec and then a little bit more backward on that lat. Again, this top arm is great for a kickstand, and then the lower body is whatever shape it needs to be. But what I'm looking to do is start to roll more forward, more prone, so that we compress that entire front pec. So what I like to do is you can either grab that other block, try to have all your pecs near you so you don't have to keep sitting up and down. Apologies. It's either you can use the block and just sort of start to roll forward, and then this can catch you at your third eye. And then I'm visually compressing myself on the front of my pec with this block. All my body weight is on it now. Or sometimes I don't even use that block and I just use these hands, and I can kind of make a fist, and then maybe after like 10 breaths, maybe I feel like I could lower. It's not the goal to get all the way down, but if it feels like you have some release and you can do that, cool. All right, so you're going to do this for 1 to 2 minutes. Then you're going to come back up nice and slow, nice and steady. You're going to slide that block out of the way. You're going to lower yourself onto that arm. You're going to roll open onto your back. You're going to bend your knees, take your feet really wide, and then windshield wiper. Arms are to a T, palms are going to face up. You're going to go side to side, side to side. Do that maybe 5 to 10 times, and then we're going to try to drop more towards the right or the opposite arm that we started with. So for example, we started with the left arm, so I'm going to let my thighs drop to the right. When they can't go anymore, now I'm going to think about my left knee reaching towards the top right corner of the mat. So the front of my left hip is reaching up and away, and my left glute is lifting. So now I've got a big stretch in my left thigh into that quad, maybe even into the obliques, and it's giving me this little stretch in that left pec that I was just compressing, and I'm going to roll my gaze lazily to the right. And then I'm just going to try to breathe into this entire line. Big expansive inhales, big passive exhales. So I'm going to try to be here again 1 to 2 minutes on almost any one of these things. On those things that we're doing a little dynamically, like cat, cow, etc., 10 to 20 breaths. And you're going to just kind of slowly take your time. You'll come back through center, stillness, or windshield wiper a little bit. And then we're going to go roll back to that left side, and we're going to take that deep compression into the front of the shoulder blade. So how we'll do that is we'll have the block on the second height again. You can use 1 or 2 balls. You could have 2 balls in a little sock or a little bag if you have one, or just use a single ball. But I'm placing the ball on the block, or you could place it in the hollow of the armpit. And again, you can play around with palpating here. So I like to use like a little lobster claw. My left arm's in a cactus position. My left thumb is gonna reach into my armpit and I'm gonna poke around. And if I feel my shoulder blade, that bone back there, I'm looking to have it about where my thumb is kind of poking in that general area. So the front of your shoulder blade. I know that seems kind of odd. And then I'm gonna kind of angle myself and then I'm going to try to support my head again. And then it's not that you're doing anything wrong if you have that left elbow pointing to the side, but as much as you can, having it a little bit more up and away. And then you're playing around with whatever angle it feels like you can kind of get into the front of the shoulder blade, if you can visualize that, right? Those deep, deep muscles. And then we're just trying to soften into that tension and breathe here. If you can't get any sort of release or sort of, I can do this, I can breathe through this, then again, back off, move the ball, do whatever you need. 1 to 2 minutes here. I'm just kind of moving fast through this. Take your time coming out. One more time, you're gonna remove all the props, slide that left arm out, come back to your back. As much time as you need in between any of these shapes. The next one we're gonna try to do is sort of maybe the attachment of the lat and then that posterior deltoid. So my left arm is gonna head to more of a goal post where it's like elbows bent, the lower arm bone and the fingertips are pointing to the sky. And you're just placing the ball back there in the upper arm bone somewhere. And then I like to play around with internal and external rotation. If you find a spot you're like, ooh, that feels gross, then you just hang out and breathe. If you want to straighten the arm, feel free. If it feels like you're locking out your elbow, put something like a blanket or a block underneath that forearm. 1 to 2 minutes here. If it feels like that was helpful, but there was another spot, you can always lift up nice and slow and then come a little bit closer, maybe even all the way to the torso, jumping from the arm bone to possibly the shoulder blade or closer to the rib cage. So there's one spot on the shoulder or on the upper arm bone, a second spot on the upper arm bone, onto the torso itself, or on the back of the shoulder blade, what's called the infraspinatus. So this one, that arm probably won't touch on the back and you're probably going to be hanging off it. So you can be doing these internal and external rotation movements. Again, you could just drop that arm out if it feels like it's extending the elbow. Again, support that arm. And we just want to relax the muscle group as much as we can and breathe. So 1 to 2 minutes here and slowly lift up. You could take that arm across and try to stretch a little bit. You could sort of do opposite arms. You'll remove that ball entirely. And then you'll do all of that on the other side. So the quad exercises that we're looking to maybe get into are going to be compression on the front of the thigh with a ball. So you can do a single ball, a double ball. You could do both legs at the same time or just one. So you're going to be lying more prone. Again, a single ball at the center of the quad, starting about 3 to 4 inches above the knee. For some of us, being on our belly doesn't feel good in the lower back, so you can always throw something underneath your shins to support them. Otherwise, you could have a little kickstand or the top of your foot, whatever feels better, and then support your head and neck however you need. But I want you to relax the quads as much as possible. They're strong, dense, thick muscles that like to engage. So you're either doing this with the balls, one at a time, both legs at a time, or if this is too intense and too specific, then we're going to be using that blanket roll that we created or that bath towel. So same thing, you're either going to have this across both legs, and then you're just trying to relax and breathe and be here for 1 to 2 minutes. You could play around with bending one knee and windshield wipering. You could bend both knees and windshield wiper. And then really you could hit 1, 2, 3, 4. You could hit like 12 different spots here. With the ball, you're going at the center, but with the blanket, it's hitting sort of a broad space. So you could really just go all the way out, but just above the knee a few inches and just below that sort of hip attachment. So just that real meaty spot of the quad. Another place where we could be getting that two for the price of one is hitting the side of the quad, or sort of on that side of the leg where the IT band is, where we pin that IT band. So you could also, when you're doing this whole series, when you got this block here, this blanket could be on the side of that left leg if you're on your left side, and you could just be compressing, or you could be kind of just bending and straightening that leg a little bit. Same thing on the outside of the leg, as little or as much pressure. You could be doing this. If this is just too overwhelming with two different things going on, I totally get that. So you could do this one at a time or add this when you're doing your side shoulder work, or just do it secondary. So you could take this from your belly, do this, roll over to your side, use a block for some support, do this little side series. If both legs on top is too much weight, right, that's body weight, you could just adjust that top leg up and off. And then you could bend both knees like you were walking. Otherwise, it's just that leg that is compressing into the blanket would be what you're affecting. So we're moving the hamstrings and the quads in opposite direction when we're walking. So you'll feel that for sure. You can hit about 3 spots on that thigh, usually on the quad, on the outside feels really helpful. All right, so we got the quads, we got that whole shoulder series. And then after we do all that myofascial stuff, I would love to have a little bit of movement and then the exercises. So once you do that first standing series, then you'll come to the floor, you'll do that part, and then you'll come back up. So you can sit down or you can stand, totally up to you, using a ball in your hand or maybe like a 1 or 2 pound weight. But a ball is good because you can squeeze on it, get some of that pressure and activation in the shoulder, and then try to use those shoulder muscles. But what we're looking to do is you can do both at the same time or just isolate one at a time. We're going to try to just externally rotate. So we're going to have this bend, 90-degree bend. I'm trying not to take my elbow out, and I'm trying not to take my elbow in, trying to just rotate out. And then I'm going to hold it out, squeezing the ball, and then I'm holding it back in. So you're going to do this 5 to 8 times, just bringing this rotation. I'm squeezing and taking out, holding out, coming back in. Great, so you're gonna do that a few times. And then we're gonna try to squeeze and take it more forward. So elbow, the height of the shoulder, or just where it feels like you can keep that without shifting, without moving too much, right? So maybe you're here, and then you take it back in. So you're gonna do that again 5 to 8 times. So externally rotate, and then some flexion. And then your third round, you're gonna go up to the height that you have that control, and then you're gonna try to take it out without shifting the chest forward, without shifting the spine forward, and then all the way back in. So then we're connecting those. So forward, out, back in, back down. So 5 to 8 times, whatever works for you. We're gonna try to do both arms with that just because I think it's a really good rehab for both shoulders. It gives us mobility, it gives us stability. That's what we're looking for, is that stability. So try to do that, especially on an injured side, but both sides would maybe be a great way to do it. And then we're gonna get into those inner thighs, inner hamstrings, into the quads by facing the wall. And we're gonna be kind of doing I'll shift a little bit further away so you can see, sort of like warrior 2 stance. So you'll take your feet as wide as you'd like. You can totally adjust this once you play around with it. And your left toes will stay facing the wall, and then your right toes are gonna start to pivot out as much to the right as you can, and then you're gonna play around with bending the knee. So the more that you bend the knee, I want you to just play around with how much are you feeling that right on that inner thigh now. So you can play around with taking it past the heel. You could try to stay above the heel. You could maybe just be working on straightening and bending here. The wall is here, so you can play around with leaning into it, shifting away from it, taking the hips back, tucking the tail under, right? This could be this big dynamic sort of practice, or it could just be kind of creating the shape, tapping in and breathing here. So maybe 1 to 2 minutes playing around with the right side. Come out of it. You can fully come out of it. Give yourself a minute. You can take some shoulder rolls, and then you'll do the other side. So again, you're stepping the feet wide. Doesn't matter how wide, but you'll pivot the left toes out. You'll keep the right toes more towards the wall, and then you're just exploring this side. So most of us have wild asymmetries on both sides. So don't judge yourself as you explore these movements. Totally up to you. We just want some movement in these areas after we do some of that myofascial stuff. So hopefully you find this helpful. If you need anything else, just let me know. Thanks.